Well, a deal signed by U.S. President Barack Obama earlier this month will see the debt ceiling raised by $2.1 trillion from its current $14.3 trillion. But many feel that the spending cuts in the U.S. debt ceiling agreement are insufficient, and the federal debt will continue to grow.
Germain Belzile is the director of research at the Montreal Economic Institute and joins us now live from Montreal. Good morning, Germain.
Good morning.
Germain, I was doing the math. The ceiling goes up 2.1, but you're only looking at $1.5 billion worth of spending cuts. You say that's not enough.
Absolutely. In fact, if I can give an analogy, it's like a person who earns $30,000 a year and spends $50,000 a year and loads his or her credit card by $20,000 a year and has already maxed out the credit card at $150,000. And this person is planning to cut over the next 10 years $2,500 in spending. So $2,500, that's 5% of spending, and that's certainly not enough. There's still a huge gap between spending and income for the U.S. government.
What would be palatable to you, Germain, in terms of what should they cut?
Well, they'll have to look at everything. In fact, discretionary spending is close to 2/3 of spending in the U.S. And that's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, Obamacare also, and that costs a huge amount of money, and spending in these areas is increasing much faster than GDP. So they'll have to look at everything, in fact.
Do you think, Germain, that they're going to have to look at increasing taxes? And if you do you think they can get that done?
Well, taxes may be part of the solution, but if we look at Canada, between 1994 and 1998, we went from a huge deficit to a surplus, and we did it by cutting spending by $7 for each $1 of increase in taxes. So it's certainly possible to do it. The Canadian government did it. And if you look at what's been happening under Obama during the past 2.5 years, well, spending has exploded. In fact, non-defense spending is at an all-time high in the U.S.
Yeah, the difference, though, Germain, is that we did increase. We brought in GST. We brought in tax revenue, increased tax revenue.
But as I said, for every dollar in tax increase in Canada, $7 were cut at the Canadian government. Don't forget that the employment for the Canadian government decreased by 42,000 people during the 4 years under Chrétien and Martin. So it's certainly possible to do it. And the U.S. was certainly look at spending before they look at taxes.
Is there an appetite to cut spending in the U.S., do you think?
Well, for the moment, the public seems to be wanting to keep low taxes, or comparatively low taxes, high spending, and to have also a budget in equilibrium, and that's not possible. So I believe that once the public is there, as we were in 1993, well, the politicians will become more courageous and try to look for ways to cut spending.
Is that effectively what's going on with the Standard & Poor's lowering from AAA, giving a wake-up call to the American public?
Exactly, that's a wake-up call. They told the U.S. government some time ago that if they didn't cut at least $4,000 billion in the deficit over the next 10 years, that a downgrade was in the cards. And in fact, they only cut $2,100 billion, so half what Standard & Poor's was asking for. And Standard & Poor's even said during the past weekend that if they don't get serious about deficits, that in fact another downgrade down the road is certain in about 2 years' time.
But everybody's screaming blue murder because of the downgrade. I mean, how do you move people along and convince them that this is the wake-up call and they've got to take action immediately?
Well, I don't know. You know,
you got to go down there.
Yeah, you got to go down there. You know, in Canada, when Chrétien was elected for the first time in 1993, in the polls, the most important problems for Canadians were unemployment and inflation and etc. And the deficit was way down the list. After the Mexican crisis in 1994, the peso crisis, Canada was touched by that. In fact, our interest rates increased because a lot of people thought that Canada was looking more and more like Mexico. And that was a wake-up call not only for politicians but for the public. And in fact, not long after, polls showed that the #1 problem in the eyes of Canadians was the deficit. And that's when politicians became serious about cutting the deficit.
Okay, Germain, suppose the Americans can't fix their problem and they don't resolve this overall, certainly not before the election. Is there a chance that Canada could get dragged down with them?
Well, there's a lot of uncertainty right now in the United States, and that's certainly not helping consumer confidence and business confidence. So consumption is low, investment is low, so there's a big slowing down in the States. They're our biggest partners, the Americans. So our exports could go down, and in fact we could see a slowdown. A recession in Canada is very far down the road. We're still growing pretty strongly in Canada.
That's good to hear. Thanks so much, Germain. Pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.